Now, last session, your first homework assignment was to build on the personal finance budget that we created. We created a spreadsheet that tracks your income and your expenses and what that would mean for your savings balance year by year. And your homework assignment was to take that and build a second tab that was at the monthly level. Since ultimately, you probably not just want to check on things at an annual basis, but also a monthly basis. And then add to that a way that you could not just forecast out what your expenses and income and savings were, but a way of actually seeing how that compared to reality as time passes by and see if you're on track to hit the savings goals that you set in the past. So let's get into Excel and I'll show you one solution, not necessarily the only solution for doing that. Here we are in Excel, and we're taking a look at the personal finance budget that we created at the annual level for the next 10 years in the last session on the Introduction to Excel. And now what we want to do is first take this annual budget and parse it out at the monthly level. So I'll do that. I'm going to be a little quicker this time so we can get on to the next homework assignments in our Power BI session today. But first I'm going to click on plus to create a new tab in Excel. I'm going to right click on that to rename it, and we'll call this our monthly budget. We want to give it an intuitive name. I'm going to turn off grid lines by going to view and turning off the grid lines there, similar to what we did for our annual budget. And we want these to be linked so that if we make any changes in our assumptions to the annual budget, it would automatically flow through to our monthly budget. So what I'm going to do is start off by maybe copying and pasting this entire template so I kind of get the labels and everything. Might as well take advantage of the work we've already done. Just do a simple paste over here. You can see it's going to throw off the references. I didn't do copy paste special values or anything like that, so the references are certainly going to be all over the place. But what we have now is at least 10 cells up here. We'll want this for 12 cells. We'll just do this for 2023 and breaking it out from January to December 2023 for this example, but obviously you could forecast it even further if you wanted to see it for the next few years. I'll call this January 2023. Now notice it turned it into a number here. We're going to just right click on that cell, click format, and then we'll say date. There we go. And we kind of want a date that has the, maybe something like this, that has the first 3 letters of the month dash the last 2 numbers of the year. That looks good. Sometimes when you drag this over, okay, in this case it's the same, what we might be able to do kind of quickly here is say, okay, how about this plus, let's see what we can do, plus 30. We'll do plus 32. Actually, maybe a better way, February 2023. And then sometimes when you highlight 2 cells and then drag it over, Excel kind of looks for that pattern and then continues it. So that seemed to work really well right there. I'll do that a little bit further for all the way through December now. Great. So we've got our months through December now. Now when it comes to parsing out your expectations for how this, for instance, salary paces by month, we need to factor the number of paydays in a month. Sometimes, especially when it comes to the expense side of things, you might actually expect a different pacing of expenses by month. And if you really wanted to get very specific, you certainly could. Perhaps you could set like an index table that would look just like this, but with something that would parse it out for January through December, for instance. We're going to do ours very simple. We're just going to divide everything by 12 for now. Give a high-level idea of what we should expect. So in order to do that, we will start with an equal sign in our cell C6 for January 2023 salary. And in Excel, you're not limited to just linking to cells in the same worksheet. You can actually link to cells in another worksheet as well. So here we're going to go back to our annual budget, link to our 2023 salary, and then simply say divide in our formula bar by 12. Look at that, 5,000. That's 60,000 divided by 12. Perfect. Now, in our case, when we drag this over, if we're not careful, we would actually see the salary increase because it's not actually linking to the January column anymore. It is drug over, and it's now, our February 2023 would be linking to column D, which represents 2024 in this tab. That's an opportunity for us to lock in the letter, lock in the column. So before we drag this over, our cell C6 here, we need to lock in the C, the column. And now when we drag to the right, it's looking much better. 50,000, and let's keep dragging that for our December over here. Now when we add this up, it adds up to 60,000. We can see that at the bottom. Looks great. Let's go ahead and the next thing we had was return on savings. We'll just simply divide that by 12 as well. That looks good. Now we didn't lock in the row, so this drug down just fine. Now it's referencing C21. Let's just do a check over here. C21, yep, that's the $2,000 for our return on savings that we expected in 2023, and we're simply dividing by 12, which is great. So that's looking good. Let me update the formatting over here. Sometimes when you drag to the right, it changes the formatting. I'll add back that bottom border to denote the sum. And we also need to take our sum, but this was just, this is one of the formulas that works just fine still. It's just summing up the salary and return on investment rows. Drag that over to the right. Let's double click on right side of column B to expand that. Now we can see the full length of characters for our labels here. Same thing with taxes. We're going to take this formula, just do Control Z, Control V, and now it's just pulling from the taxes row, dividing by 12. We're basically going to do that for everything here. So I'm going to drag down, and then I'm going to drag over all the way through December. I'm going to drag our total row over, add back the border line. Now notice our label here, it was going through 10 time periods, 10 years before. Now we need to update it to be through 12 months. So I'm going to highlight the additional 2 cells and click Merge and Center, which undoes the merging and puts the income text back in just column B, but then I'm just going to click it again to now take over everything. That did get rid of the border, so I'm going to add back the thicker border here. And I'll do the same thing with expenses. Merge again, add the thick border. Notice this saves the last border I did, which is very convenient. I'll do the same thing with savings. Okay, great. And it looks like I need to update well, actually, savings calculation is the difference between income and expenses. That works just fine. Now our savings balance here, let's see what happened here. Okay, it wasn't even able to find a starting reference for our previous bank account, so our previous savings balance. So what we'll do is say equals, we'll just point this back to our parameter cell for our starting savings balance here, 50,000, and then from there we just reference that new savings balance at the end of that month and add what our savings was for that month and go from there. So we'll just drag this to the right a little bit more. Now a good check would be to look at our final projected ending balance December 2023, see if that lines up with our projected ending balance for 2023 on our annual tab. So we're looking for 65,200 for the savings balance. 65,200. Great, the check passes. And this right here is a very simple way where we just took our annual number, we referenced it, So now watch this. If all of a sudden we say, oh, we put in the wrong salary, starting salary, it was supposed to be 65,000 instead. Now this automatically updates because it's linked. It's very important to keep things linked in most cases. And so another way of saying that is avoid hard coding. And I will just Control Z to undo that. All right, we've got our budget broken out. Now, another thing we mentioned was we might not just want to look at what that monthly expectation is, but have a way of adding in actuals and even easily seeing where we were off the most from what we expected versus what we actually brought in and spent. So there's a few ways of doing that. You could look at it from a horizontal perspective versus a vertical perspective, a row perspective versus a column perspective. We could have have a section and call this our budget, and then maybe copy and paste this all below and have our actuals, and then even have another set of rows below that was the difference, that was the gap. That's certainly one way we could do it. I'm going to do it from a column perspective in this case. And so what I'll do is highlight column D here next to January 2023. I'm going to insert a few rows, right click on column D, insert. I'm going to insert another row, and I'm going to insert another row. 3 total rows. And then from there, guess I'll, where do I want to put the labels here? I'll put the labels right under the month label. And I'll call this budget, forecast, however you want to frame it. And then I'll call this actual, and I'll call this difference. Yep. And that'll apply for all of our months. So at this point, what I might do is copy these cells. This is kind of neat. I'm going to highlight column H here, insert copied cells. This is a little manual, as Excel often tends to be. Might be a better way of doing this. All right, you get the idea. I'll do this for one more. And I'm actually, we'll just do a 6-month budget for now. First 6 months of 2023. Okay, my copying over didn't quite work there. Very good. All right, so now let's say we're in January 2023 and we find our salary was actually $5,500. Our return on savings maybe was a little bit lower than what we expected. We would want this to, the total income, we can have the exact same there. And our difference is going to be the difference between what we actually spent in that month, or sorry, what we actually earned in that month, since it's our salary row, minus what we had budgeted. So salary came in 500 higher, return on savings came in 67 lower. Net, when we add those up, from an income perspective, we came in $433 above our budget. Great. So we'll just put in a few different values here. Let's say our taxes, and some things are going to be the same, let's say. Mortgage is usually pretty predictable. Car payment. Utilities can probably vary. There we go. We've got a few sample values there. And again, our formula for the difference is just going to be actual minus budget. Drag that down. Drag over our total rows. All right. This tells us that we spent about $300 more across all these categories than what we anticipated. And we can quickly see that a big part of that was because of our car payment. I'm going to adjust that to be the same. Okay, so now it would be the other category that would be the biggest driver, and we came in pretty close, $100 dollar difference. We could look at this from a percentage perspective if we thought that would be helpful. Needing to add the border back in there. All right, but that looks good. And then our savings and savings balance. Let's drag this over, since this formula is simply the difference between our income and expenses. And this tells us that overall, when you factor in that we took in 433 more, but we spent 100 more, net net, our savings was 333, higher than we expected. Very cool to see all of that for a given month. Now every month we can come back in our actuals and see what the impact was. So that's looking really good. I suppose I could take this. Sometimes what I'll do if I'm worried about stretching out if I kind of want to replicate this formula, but keep it as a formula. I'll copy this from the formula bar, double click in the cell that I want to copy it to, paste it here. Now notice what's unique about this is the cells have not scrolled over at all. So that's one way of accomplishing that. If you don't want the cells to scroll over, you still want them to be linked, but to the original cells, just copy the actual text in the formula bar over to the new cell. Now here, I would want it to point to the actual savings, but I wanted to keep C2 intact. Another way of doing that could have been to just use the $sign to lock in the cell. But that looks good. And then let's see, for a difference here, I'll just do the actual minus savings balance, 333, same as above. Looks great. Need to update some formatting. I might do something like this. I'll just show what's kind of aesthetically pleasing for me. Some of this is based on personal preference. Like that. I might put another cell, another column in to delineate between the labels and everything else. Now I'm going to need to undo merge cells to get this the way I'm thinking about it. I might actually move this over. Did Control X there and Control V to move these, Control Cut and Control Paste. Now this is always interesting. We've got some leftover formatting here. To clear that out, from a border perspective, what I'll do is highlight those cells where I want to clear the border out. Click on the border option and then say no border. Now the only downside with that, again, the last border option you use is always going to show up as the default here. The only downside is now I've got to, well, I need to remerge these cells anyway. And click on that thick border, merge. I've got to redo the border right next to it sometimes when you clear the borders. Just kind of look out for that. Got the border there. I'm going to widen these because I think difference is getting cut off just a little bit there. Might widen it a little bit more here. Yeah. Here again, I'm going to clear the border there. And that took off this border. Just a lot of aesthetic stuff here. Okay, I think I'm good with that. A lot of different ways we could do this, but I kind of have a three column set of columns here for each month. The budget, the actual, the difference. You can see they're kind of grouped together, and you know, from there I'd probably do the same thing for the other months. I might even, I guess an efficient way to do this would be to highlight these, copy these cells, insert, maybe even copy the whole thing like that. The spacer column before it, and insert. Okay, so now we'd have February 23 here and March 23 here. We'll just leave it at that. We went from 12 months to 6 months to 3 months. Just kind of simplifying here. Okay, again, the border keeps took off the end part here, so I'm reapplying that border. And yeah, it looks pretty good so far. You could, in some cases, like if we just finished January, all of this would be blank. We can actually keep the savings there since that's just a simple formula between the income and expenses, so that the delta 0 right now. Or actually the delta is showing negative here because we don't have any values. So there's a few ways of handling that. Maybe the approach we take is to use what our budget was for that month, and that's what we populate it with, and then we update it with actuals. That way, if we're projecting this for an entire year, we have some reasonable numbers. Now, there's different ways of coming up with what our expectation is. If we've been running high or running low for most of the year and we expect that to continue, then maybe this would become more of a formula like, in this case, we'd only have 1 month, but we reference like an average of what we've seen so far that year, or something that would take into account seasonality if we had a seasonal index. So we could also kind of, in this case, if we assume that the rest of the year would be based on January, which we wouldn't necessarily want to base everything on 1 month. It'd probably be better just to base everything on what the budget was. But if you did have an updated expectation, you could fill that in for the actuals, and that way when you're looking at things and maybe forecasting for the year, you can kind of forecast based on what's actually happened, which would be populated, and based on what's forecasted to happen, where do we think we're going to land for the year. So hopefully that's just a quick overview of how you could build a budget at the monthly level and compare it to your actual spend to be able to highlight where the actuals were most different from what you had planned. I want to thank you for watching today. I hope you got a lot out of it. And if you did, please consider liking the video and subscribing if you'd like to see more videos like this in the future. Now, if you have any questions about what we covered, please consider leaving a comment and I'll try to respond to it as soon as I can. One last thing, if you or your organization ever need anything analytics related, an analysis, a dashboard build, maybe a data science model build, perhaps deeper training on this very topic or other analytics topics, even a complete analytics transformation, please consider Value-Driven Analytics. Check out our site at valuedrivenanalytics.com, and if it resonates with you, give us a call. We'd love to help you out.